So welcome to the last webinar of the year. I hope you've all had a good year. Hope you've done lots of Loxone installations. This week, I am going to cover planning and designing Loxone for hospitality projects. Now, hospitality projects have been a thing with Loxone for quite a few years now, but more so in recent months, I would say. In case you've been living under a rock, we've recently brought out a few products dedicated to hospitality, that being the Mini Server Compact and the Touch Pure Flex. And last week we went through designing and configuring a Touch Pure Flex, but hopefully you watched that. And if you do want to watch it again, you'll be able to find the recording on YouTube. And the Mini Server Compact specifically is designed for those smaller projects where the full-size mini server just doesn't quite fit, potentially not necessarily the size, but the Mini Server Compact has got technologies in it that the normal mini server doesn't, like Loxone Air built in, so you don't need the additional airbase extension, Tree Turbo, so no longer do you need the audio server. It's also got Tree and Link, and now that Link output can also be used as a tree branch should you not need any extensions, which is really, really powerful. And also the relays are 16 amps. So for example, in hotels, you're often, when you take the card out of the card holder in the hotel room, all of the sockets get switched off and you can control those sockets directly from Loxone now. So let's have a look at what I would plan for. I'm going to use a couple of examples. So we're going to look at hotel rooms, and we're also going to look at restaurants, so other kind of areas of hospitality. But I think hotel rooms and restaurants have quite a big kind of, not focus, but quite a big potential of where you can use Loxone. It doesn't need to be full scale either. It can be small areas which can be quite impactful to the business owner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head straight into Loxone config, and we're going to start planning a project. So let's get planning tool out of the way. Okay. Cool. So project planning. Now the project planning the example I'm going to follow is this floor plan I found on Google about an hour ago. And this floor plan is, I'm pretty sure we can all agree, is a standard hotel room that you'd come across, whether that be in the UK or whether that be internationally. It's a hotel room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and plan it to quite a high standard, because ultimately it doesn't need to be travel lodge standards. So we want to be offering something even better than what could be going in the likes of a Hilton hotel, which is considered quite a good hotel if you're looking at hotel chains. So we'll look at what hardware we can put in there. We'll look at, of course, the cost, and then we'll look at what benefits it's going to give, because ultimately it's nice. Of course, Loxone's great to experience and live with, but what benefits is this really giving? More importantly, the business owner, the hotel owner and the organization, but also what benefit is it giving the guests when they're staying? So let's get straight into it. So what we'll do is we'll minimize that for now, and we'll just name it hotel room. And the mini server type we're going to use is, of course, the Mini Server Compact, given that it is intended for hotel rooms. Now, of course, I'm not going to do loads of different rooms, so I'm going to get rid of all of the default stuff in the project planning tool. There we go. So firstly, we're going to, of course, have to configure the room itself. Now, in the room itself, we're, of course, going to have to start with lighting. Now, in terms of lighting, I am not a big fan of black pour room illuminations in different rooms. For example, in the bedroom, I like quite soft lighting. I can see what I'm doing. I can see where I'm going. Ultimately, in a hotel room, you're going to want to be able to see so you can get dressed. You potentially are going to be working at the desk, so it needs to be bright as well. And ultimately, you're going to want to be able to relax there. So we need enough light, but we don't need to be covering it in spots. And then in the bathroom, we need it nice and bright so that you can have a shower or a bath. But you also want to have the ability to have it nice and dim during the night so that you're not startled. Ultimately, we all understand night mode. But more importantly, we also need it to be manageable for the hotel owner. So what we'll do is we'll get straight into it. So let's say that this hotel room's about, let's say 12 square meters, just as a rough estimate. I know it says a measurement on the floor plan, but I think that's including the bathroom. So what I would start off with is the lighting for the bedroom. And I would personally put, I would say 4 spots in this room. So I wouldn't put spots over the top of the bed. And we'll get on to what I would do for lighting around the bed in a moment. But I would put a spot or 2 spots on this side, so then it's covering the desk area and also just this kind of thoroughfare area, perhaps where you'd be getting dressed or storing bags. I'd then put a spot here, so around where the TV area is, and also a spot outside the wardrobe and outside the bathroom. So, and ultimately that's as you come in the room. So you want it to be nice and bright. And then controlling these lights, I'm going to put a presence sensor, and because of the shape of the room, we want a presence sensor that's going to detect you as soon as you enter. So ultimately around the area of the door, and also put a presence sensor in the area of the bedroom. So what we'll do is we'll get straight into it. You can see there 4 spots is calculated about right, and we'll just call these spots. Now, in terms of additional lighting in this room, I would just go for some LED strip around perhaps the headboard. Now, with LED strip, it's more than bright enough for like focus light for things like reading and also watching TV with the main lights in the room off. So I think that would be more than sufficient. You could, of course, go down the route of having some lights either side of the bed, but it's up to you. It's personal preference ultimately. So what we can do is we can add the RGBW dimmer that we require for that. Now, I would go for a compact dimmer so that you don't have to have additional space in the panel, and the layout of the room can be determined later. So for example, you could put the RGBW dimmer behind the headboard with the LED strip itself. So we'll just add the compact dimmer tree, and then you can just run tree cable to that point, along with the Touch Pure Flexes and the spots that you're going to have in the room. We'll just call this headboard. Now, moving on to shading, I think it would be quite nice to add shading as a feature in here. We'll go for curtains, because curtains is what you most likely find in a hotel room. So just use the Nano 2 relay tree, and with the Nano 2 relay tree, you can either put it in like an isolating box in the corner next to the curtain rail, or of course you could store it in the panel in the wardrobe. It's up to you. So we'll just name this curtains. And then for climate control is one of those things that could vary how you control it. It may be controlled directly in the room. You may physically have actuators in that room. If it's radiators, most likely. And if it's underfloor heating or something else that's more centrally managed, that's when you'll be looking at having more plant room based control. And we'll get on to how that would be approached in a moment. So for the purpose of this exercise, what we can do is we can allow for the valve actuator, even if it's not in the physical room itself and it's centrally controlled. It's going to be part of the control for the room anyway, so we'll leave it as is. Now for audio, we're going to, like I said, we're going for quite a high level. I'd put just 1 speaker in there. Gives them the ability to listen to the radio, potentially have an alarm clock wake them up in the morning as well. So we'll go for a ceiling speaker. Presence sensor, I would put a presence sensor on the ceiling in the bedroom area, and I'll also put a presence sensor as you come into the room. Now, when it comes to controlling everything, I'm going to put a Touch Pure Flex either side and a Touch Pure Flex as you come into the door. There we go. So 3-touch pure flexes. And then you've got to think about access control. Now, for access control, most hotel rooms have got, well, if you go for more traditional, of course, you can get a lock and key. But most common is going to be like one of those access card systems. We've, of course, got the NFC code touch. So let's add an NFC code touch. Now, for controlling the door lock itself, we need a relay. On the Mini Server Compact, we've got 2 relays. So we will just use one of the digital outputs for the door lock. When it comes to security, we don't need door and window contact airs, but we've got digital inputs on the Mini Server Compact. So you can connect like a wired door and window contact to the window. And then if the customer leaves or the guest leaves the window open, it will then prevent the heating from coming on. Again, another energy saving factor. So we can just say window. And then when it comes to utilizing other inputs and of course outputs, what we'll do firstly is the first input we're going to need is like the card slot. So of course, yes, we're using the NFC code touch for access control. The card slot, obviously the NFC code touches any NFC tag or card that you can use. And you could use that same card in the card slot as you enter the room. And this then means that when you leave the room, it can cut the power to everything off, everything and turn off all the lights. So we'll just call this like card holder. And that will just be closing a contact into a digital input of the Mini Server Compact. And last but not least, the digital output for the socket circuit. And I think that's a good starting point for the room. And then we'll just have a look at the bathroom. And then for the bathroom, I would just have a ceiling light. And then it's just one device that you need to install. It's got the motion sensor built in as well. We've got no shading in there. Climate control, we could just allow for that if it is done separately to the room. Most hotel rooms you find it's not, but we're going to say that it's a bit more premium and it is zoned. If we have a look at this, we could put a speaker in this room, but then it would mean it's either over the bath directly or over the toilet. It wouldn't be central to the room, especially as you've got a ceiling light. So for this occasion, we're not going to have a speaker in there. So will mean we've got a stereo extension and just one speaker. It's ultimately going to be cost saving, but it's unnecessary in the bathroom. Flush mount presence sensor, we don't need because we've got a ceiling light, so we can get rid of that. And then when it comes down to controls, we don't really need a switch or anything in the bathroom because as you walk in, the lights will come on. And then once you've finished in there, the lights can turn off again. So really, I wouldn't worry about a switch in the bathroom. That being said, you may need something for temperature management. And like I said, in most bathrooms, it's going to be all done with the rest of the room. So really, we could just remove this for this example and this exercise, just so we don't have to worry about anything else that we need to take into account. But in this example, we've got automated lighting, and that's it. I would even argue we don't even need to worry about ventilation for hotel rooms. And the reason being is that is like 9 times out of 10 are always centrally managed with some sort of equivalent to an MVHR system. And we will just continue with that approach and we'll be looking at how that would be centrally controlled later on. And so we just click OK and then next. And you can see that naturally it's put the power supply back up. And of course, 40 amps is way too much for one room. But you can see for lighting and audio, and then the controls and peripherals all together, it's less than 10 amps. It's even less than 4 amps. So we could just go for a 4.2 amp power supply, which would be more than sufficient for all of the equipment that we've allowed for. So let's save this parts list. And we will save the planning file as well. And let's have a look at what this has come out to. Okay, so about £3,000 ex VAT. And you can see that This is all specific to one room. Now, in terms of the panel space that is going to be required for this, you'll find that in most hotel rooms, every hotel room I've been to, there's always a panel in like the wardrobe or behind the wardrobe. So you just need a kind of single consumer unit to fit this hardware in, because the only thing that's going in this panel is the mini server compact, the power supply, and the stereo extension. And the example I've got for what will be required is, here is something we prepared earlier. You got mini server compact and the stereo extension. As I said, you could put the Nano 2 relay tree in the panel if you wanted to control the curtains centrally, or of course you could put it in a box in the ceiling next to the curtains. Power supply, and then any terminal blocks you need. So realistically, you're going to be looking at something like this. A normal consumer unit, 30 quid. So the grand scheme of things, the installation really isn't a huge, great deal. And all of this is going to be wired in tree, with of course, the exception of the ceiling speaker. With the ceiling speaker, of course, that's just going to be 2 cords of speaker cable from the panel to wherever the speaker is, but everything else is all going to be run on tree cable. And I would argue you would only need 2 or 3 tree cables for this whole installation. One going from the panel around the room, one going into the bathroom, and potentially you may need a third one for the LED strip, but really not that much at all. And this is reproducible, of course. Now, if you are putting this into a hotel room, you've got to think about scaling this. So let's say, for example, it's a 40-bedroom hotel. So we can just look at what this cost would look like. You can see here, that's £120,000 just for hardware for this hotel owner. But we really need to understand what benefits this is giving them. So in the hotel rooms, what you'll find is in nearly every hotel room, even if they've got a control system, the heating will be constantly running with the potential that someone has booked that hotel room, that a guest will be staying, which is a crazy waste of energy. So you're constantly heating a room for literally no purpose. Whereas with Loxone, of course, you know that we don't need to do that. And the way that we know that a guest has booked is because we can integrate with a hotel management or hotel booking system. And they can, for example, assign a room, and then the mini server will also automatically make sure that that room is up to the correct temperature when it should be. Then you've got the lighting side of things. Again, you will find that in hotel rooms, lights will be set to the welcome scene or mood, so that when you walk into your hotel room, everything will be lit up nice and bright, and you can see how wonderful this expensive hotel room is looking. And again, you could have a hotel room that's unoccupied for months, and again, that's going to be wasting so much energy. My dad is actually runs a hotel and restaurant. He's in the hospitality industry himself, and he's even said that they even leave the radio on just in case somebody's going to be going in there, so that it's automatically playing as soon as they arrive. Even some case, the cleaners leave the window open to air the room out, and they're still heating the room. So I think ultimately the most important thing here is energy saving. You've then got the easy management side of things. So at one click of a button, whether that be when the cleaner enters the room or when the guests check out, reception can reset the room back to default. So it means that if the customer has interacted with the room in terms of customizing set points of the temperature on the Touch Pure Flex, or adjusted how the music operates, adjusted any of the lighting, as soon as they check out, the room will reset back to default with one press of a button. It could even be done automatically at a set point during the day. Then you've got access control. Access control is, again, easily managed through all one place. So you've got all of your lighting, all of your heating, all of your access control and audio in one place for the hotel rooms. So as the guests arrive, they can the reception can simply assign them a card or a tag or whatever they choose to do, and everything will be already set up for them. And then once they leave, everything is reset. So really little interaction for the hotel themselves. Again, I don't know whether I said before, please do use the chat or the Q&A section of Zoom if you do have any questions. Now, let's have a look at the kind of central control, because ultimately this is a room by room basis. Whereas when it comes to the central control for the hotel, we'll forget about any communal areas in terms of like restaurant and reception area for a moment, because we'll look at that shortly. But in terms of things like thoroughfares, like hallways and the BMS control side of things, the plant room side of things, we need to understand what we need to control for that. Now, I touched on already ventilation and heating. Now, ventilation systems can tend to be quite self-sufficient. But if we know that a room is unoccupied, we can run the ventilation on its boost setting to make sure that the room is well ventilated and there's no stagnant air in there. And that can be easily done by utilizing the presence sensors and or time of day. Then when it comes to your kind of central heating control, because we're gonna be wanting to control things like pumps and zone valves, and that again, and ultimately heat sources as well. And that again can just be done by one mini server or multiple mini servers at different areas of the building working together in a client gateway configuration. And they are potentially communicating to the mini server compacts over tree intercommunication. So you can link up to 50 mini servers on a tree cable back to one central mini server so that they can communicate digital, analog, and text values over tree, fully encrypted, so that room 49 can say, oh, I've got a call for heat. I need to start heating up. My valve actuator is going to, for argument's sake, let's say 50%. It will send that information over tree back to that central mini server, and that mini server will start running the likes of the pumps and the zone valves. And realistically, that central mini server, all it's going to be is just a mini server and maybe a relay extension, because the lighting in the thoroughfares just needs to be well lit. You could pop some presence sensors here and there depending on the size and how big the building is. So presence sensors, relays, extensions, and mini server just for the central control, which is, I can almost guarantee 9 times out of 10 going to be more cheaper than any other BMS solution out there, and it's all fully integrated with all the hotel rooms. Now that doesn't really necessarily have a cost saving side to it, but it has the easy management again, as with the hotel rooms, to manage all the plant room equipment. So the hotel owner can immediately be alerted if something's amiss, and potentially any maintenance engineers that are contracted in to maintain this installation. Ultimately, also you, the Loxone partner, you can be aware of what's going on. Now, ultimately, I've been referring to the energy saving side of things, but ultimately, you also want to know how much energy you're using. Now, another one of the webinars we've done over the last few weeks is the power supply and backup. So what you could do is you could dedicate power supply and backups for different areas of the building. You've got 7 fused outputs. And as we've already looked at, we're not using more than 10 amps. And each output is rated up to 10 amps. So you could use an output for each hotel room. And then that would give a clear indication to the hotel owner how much energy and how much power each hotel room is using at any one time. So giving that full visibility. Now, how would you manage as a Loxone partner? How would you manage the distribution of all of this? Because I've given the example of 40 or 50 hotel rooms. Just think how long it takes you already to potentially deliver a normal Loxone project, whether that be residential or commercial. You've now got 40 plus mini servers to commission. That is a huge chunk of time. However, with, again, one of the features we released with the mini server compact and the Touch Pure Flex was multiplicator. Now with multiplicator, this is a function within Loxone config. So if I create this config file for a moment, and for the, I'm pretty sure straight away, if I run auto config, it's not going to be the end of the world. Not everything will be perfect, but that's fine. Room is a bedroom. That's fine. Next, we need night mode, and we potentially need climate control. Away could be useful. Oh, we don't need climate control. There we go. So configure. So we've got our config file. And although, yes, there's going to be a couple of bits of tweaking to do in this config file, ultimately, the curtains that are going in each room are probably going to be the same. So you set it up once, so compass directions, you might have a few different types depending on where they are in the building. So we need to set the shading type. We can set the compass direction. So that's done. Of course, the Nano 2 relay tree automatically drives the curtains and calculates the time it takes. So we can do the disabling the present sensor at night. When with hotel rooms, it's really important as well that it's not intimidating to the guest, because although automation is great, it's really important that, for example, automatic shading is either explained or it's disabled, because automatic shading, of course, has a great benefit, but it's ensuring that it's not going to disturb or confuse the customer. And the last thing you want is the customer changing and the curtains opening, because that's, of course, going to lead to complaints. Now, you could have it so automatic shading operates so long as the room is unoccupied. So that could be something that you easily set up and configure. So as I said, let's assume that this is it. This is all configured. There's nothing more that we need to do. So all we need to do now is we can press convert to multiplicator project. And what you can do is add a bunch of managed mini servers. So all of your mini servers can be added here. You type in their serial number, their local IP address, their username and password, all you need to do. And then you can save the config file that you've just created to all of them. And then all you need to do is go room by room and just make sure that all of the devices are paired correctly, which really doesn't take you long at all. You could even do that on your phone. You walk into a room, connect to the mini server, pair the devices, go to the next room. Really, really quick and simple. So once you've done your config file once, realistically, you don't need to do it again, and it's going to be very, very little additional work for you to do. So that is the hotel side of things. And you may be, if you're still asking the question, why would I put Loxone into a hotel room? Why not? You've attended this webinar, so you must be interested. So why wouldn't you put Loxone in a hotel room if it's going to give you all of these benefits? If we look at the benefits it's giving to the guest, is the fact that it's simple to control with the Touch Pure Flex. No longer are you going into the hotel room and pressing all these buttons for these different light switches, and that controls that light, that controls that light, that controls that light. Then you've got the heating control of the room. We've all had it where we've gone into a hotel for the first time and we've got this thermostat on the wall, which is as useful as a chocolate teapot, because you could set it to 21 degrees and it will either be 28 or -2. And of course, we know that with Loxone and the Touch Pure Flex and the valve actuators, everything will be taken care of and everything will always be comfortable. Okay, so let's have a look at what we would potentially do for like a restaurant area. And of course, for a restaurant, most restaurants will have some sort of central system for lighting, heating, of course, and security. And lighting, heating, and security is ultimately probably most of all of your bread and butter. You know how to do this. These are the sorts of things you offer to your customers on a daily basis. Now, with lighting, of course, we're not going to have Loxone Touch Pures or potentially Touch Pure Flexes or touches all around the place. You may have one Touch Pure Flex behind the bar or wherever, or by the entrance, wherever the owner or the restaurant manager is going to be controlling the lighting, but it could be completely automated as well. Do it based on if the area is occupied. Now, 9 times out of 10, the whole restaurant will be lit when people are in there, but depending on the layout, you might want to turn off an area of the restaurant which isn't actually used at that point. And you could have it so that the lights are fading in and out between moods depending on the time of day. And ultimately, you don't want the lights to change instantly. You want them to change over a period of time, perhaps half an hour. So it's not going to be a shock or a surprise to anybody who's eating their dinner there. And of course, that can be done with the lighting controller with the parameter fading time. So it applies to how long it takes for all of those dimmable color changing lights to fade to that new mood. And that's something that a conventional lighting control system in a restaurant wouldn't necessarily give you. You've then got the security factors, and with security, that's already built in if you've got the automatic lighting with Loxone. Now, what I think is really, really cool is audio. Now, I'm not sure if everyone here has got lots of experience with audio, but audio with Loxone is really, really powerful. And it's not only great for just listening to music and all of the other benefits that you could use it for, like in the commercial application, announcements, and then in residential, of course, you've got the assisted living factors to it as well, and your burglar alarm. But I'm going to refer back again to the energy saving factor. You will find that in nearly every single hotel and restaurant and any hospitality venue, even offices, they will always have some sort of media server, like a PC, and amplifiers, and sometimes racks and racks and racks of amplifiers. Now, what I can do is demonstrate how much Loxone can save you in energy costs. So let's say for our example that your conventional solution, when I say solution, I'm talking about audio solution, is 100-watt channels for audio. Now, this is a standard AB amplifier, and you will find that even if the speakers aren't driven at 100% power, which in nearly any restaurant or a hospitality sector or venue you go to, they won't be at 100% volume. It's still using 100% of the power. But you'll actually find that AB amplifiers are really inefficient. And you'll actually find that nearly 90%, sometimes more than 90% of that power is lost to heat. So really, you might as well just put it in the center of the restaurant so you can heat the place and you're saving energy elsewhere. But 90%, that's an insane amount of power is just being lost to heat, and sometimes 95 plus. Now, let's say that you've got a restaurant with, we're going to use a nice round number of 20 speakers. That's 2 kilowatts. Now, let's bring that down. And so we know that that's 2 kilowatts. Now, restaurants, they're generally open 12 hours a day. Again, nice round number for us to work with. So 2 kilowatts constantly running at 12 hours a day is going to be 24 kilowatt hours per day. Now, restaurants are generally open 365 days a year. So let's take the example, this restaurant is open 365 days a year. And ultimately, with it being a hotel, it most likely will be. That's 8,760 kilowatt hours on a yearly basis. Now, let's convert this into money. So I think at the moment, I know residentially, the average cost per kilowatt hour is about 40 pence, 35, 40 pence. But commercially, it's significantly more. So let's say for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to go for 50 pence per kilowatt hour, because that's what it is roughly at the moment. I think that's what we're paying here for our building. So that is £4,380 per year to just run your audio system. That's not even including the cost for installing it. So I'm going to write this down for a moment. So we know that it's a 2 kilowatt speaker system. It's a 24 kilowatt hours a day, which means it's 8,760 kilowatt hours a year, and which is equating to £4,380. Now, let's look at Loxone as an alternative. So Loxone's audio server outputs and stereo extension outputs are 18 watts. Now, these are Class D amplifiers, which are 90% more efficient than standard AB amplifiers, even more than 90%. So really, you'll find that less than 10%, if not even less, maybe 5%, is lost to heat. Naturally, with all electronics, you'll find there's going to be loss of power to heat. But nearly all of those 18 watts are going to the speaker, which if we looked at the 90% that we're losing to heat to the standard AB amplifier, you're already getting more power to your speakers from the audio server. So we said we've got 24 speakers. Did we say 24? No, 20 speakers. So 20 speakers, that is 360 watts. So quite a lot less already. So let's write that down. It's a 0.36 kilowatt audio system. And we're going to times that again over the 12 hours, to be fair. And again, so we know it's over the 12 hours, that is going to be 4.32 kilowatt hours. Just making sure my maths is right there. Yes, okay, I don't want to confuse myself. Okay, now that's 4.32 kilowatt hours a day. Let's have a look at what it's going to be over the course of a year. What have I done wrong there? Because that's not correct. Is that correct? Oh yeah, it is correct. So over a course of a year, that's 1,576.8 kilowatt hours. And of course, back to money terms. So again, we're going to be doing at, before we get to money terms actually, is the audio server actually going to use 1,576.8 kilowatt hours a year? Because remember, that is driving the speakers at 100% volume. And even still at 100% volume, are you using the full 18 watts? Most likely not, because to be able to use the full 18 watts, you're going to have to be driving a very, very bassy song, sort of thing you would have in a rave, to reach those peaks. So realistically, I would say we could drop this down, so potentially even looking close to 30 to 40% power usage. So let's bring that down to 40%, because we know that the power consumption of the audio server is linear, whereas with the audio, is not Is it linear? Yeah, somewhat. It depends. It's not really, you can't really calculate audio in linear. But because it's not using the full 18 watts, whereas with an AB amplifier, it will be always using that maximum power, we can confidently say that it's really realistically, on average, going to be using about 40% of the power for a normal usage for a restaurant environment. Let's say it's about 50% in volume. Normal background music, I think even still 50% volume would be quite loud, but potentially in the evenings is going to be different compared to the daytime. So that's where that 40% is kind of a happy medium. Now, that is our real usage per year. So 630.72 kilowatt hours. Now, what is that in money? I said that our cost per kilowatt hour was 50 pence, I believe. Yes. So again, we're going to divide that by 2. That is £315 and 36 pence per year to run your audio system with Loxone. So I know that's a lot of maths, but in the grand scheme of things, comparing to most likely a much more expensive audio system that is acting as a heat generator, it takes up significantly more space, whereas with the audio server, it's so compact on a DIN rail. What we've got here is 20 speakers, which would be an audio server and 8 stereo extensions. 1 DIN rail, mini server go, easy to install, less than a day's work, and the customer is going to see a return on investment very, very quickly in less than a year. And just for simple numbers, so you can see exactly the cost difference. So 4,380 is your cost with the other system compared to the £315 for Loxone. So that is a £4,000 saving. And realistically, if we look at the cost of what the audio server is, we can quickly have a look. So 469 and then 235. So 235 times 8 plus the 469. So based on what you're saving for the energy usage, you'll probably see a return on investment in less than 6 months or around 6 months' time for just having Loxone audio in the restaurant. And that's not even to say the benefits you're going to get from that, because if you have got lighting and you have got the security, this is then adding to your internal security system. You've also got, if it's commercial, more than just a restaurant, you've got that voice announcements. You've got all the features in the app like Spotify Connect, AirPlay, streaming for Spotify, TuneIn Radio, local library of music. You've got your line in as well from other sources. So the possibilities are really, really endless. So, of course, I'm not sure how many of you specifically watching this webinar have got a lot of focus and do a lot of hospitality projects. But if this shows you something, audio in hospitality has great potential, and it's almost a no-brainer for anyone who's renovating a restaurant, doing a new restaurant. It's fantastic. Any questions so far? None at all? Okay. Out of curiosity, has anybody already installed Loxone audio into a hospitality environment? Anybody else got experience with hotels already? Come on, guys, be interactive. Ask questions. I know it's Thursday. It's late on a Thursday. Okay, cool. Well, ultimately, that pretty much wraps up this webinar. And to be honest with you, I hope it. I really hope you've all really seen learned something here and seen the benefit of what Loxone can really offer in bigger scale projects, because it really doesn't need to stay with like commercial buildings with just with an office. It doesn't need to be a full installation. It doesn't need to be residential. It can be hospitality as well. And hospitality is such a niche market. You have to find that you'll find that there isn't necessarily always a great deal of cash flow to do one huge installation with lighting and security and audio all in one go. If you find something that's a key requirement like audio and see how you compare it and introduce them to something like Loxone, and not something like Loxone, ultimately Loxone, where they're going to see the benefits immediately, it's definitely going to be worthwhile to you and your business, because it means that these sorts of things will be reproducible. There is constantly restaurants opening, constantly areas like hotels and also leisure facilities like cinemas, where in the foyer and the entrance area is definitely going to be beneficial for those applications. So before we finish, like with the other webinars, quick poll with if any of you are due update training. You can see that we have got one more available for the beginning of next year. So if you are due update training, definitely select the date. Obviously, there's only one available. We've got 50% off running, which is only available during this webinar. So if you do want to take advantage of the 50%, please do book via the poll, and then we will just get you booked on automatically. And ultimately, that's it for this year. No more webinars, but watch this space, because we'll have many more live events, not necessarily just on as webinars, but also in person as well. So would be really, really beneficial to continue watching these webinars, and hopefully you have learned loads this year. If I don't speak to any of you before, may well speak to some of you before, but have a wonderful Christmas, and I'll speak to you all in the new year. But yeah, nice to see you all this evening.